whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, 2 jabs isn't really fully vaxxed. Health officials issue a warning as booster rates stall. A new sponsorship scheme could see about 4,000 fleeing Ukrainians resettle in New Zealand temporarily. Haere rā, not quite gone by lunchtime, but maybe the Arvo tea break. Simon Bridges calls time on politics. He's live. The cost of public transport is being slashed in half, but not all commuters are created equal. Border changes mean the stampede is on for passports. The capital city ghost town, Wellington, hit with a trifecta of troubles. And as is, where is? Anyone want a rumpty former America's Cup boat? Well, does Queenstown Council have a deal for you?
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. Ahi Mārie ko Evie Ashton tēnei. New Zealanders are now being told they must have 3 shots of the COVID-19 vaccine to be fully vaccinated. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says 3 doses are needed to fully protect people against being hospitalised and dying from Omicron. He says that means a change in the way health authorities talk about vaccinations.
We're changing our language around this. Previously, we talked about fully vaccinated being 2 doses and a booster dose on top of that. Really what we should be talking about is being up to date with vaccinations, and it's quite clear now for Omicron, being up to date means having 3 doses, period.
73% of eligible people have had 3 shots, but there are nearly 950,000 who haven't had a 3rd dose. Recent figures from the northern region show 84% of people admitted to hospital for COVID had only 2 shots. COVID-19 infections edged up today with just over 21,616 new community cases and 2 deaths. Senior National MP and former leader Simon Bridges says he's leaving Parliament at a good time for his party as it starts to build some momentum. He'll depart politics in the coming weeks to follow commercial opportunities and spend more time with his family, sparking a by-election in his Tauranga electorate. Mr Bridges lost a leadership bid to Mr Luxon last year, but says his departure is not sour grapes.
There's never a perfect time, but when National's got wind in its sails is a better time. I feel that I'm able to leave National in good hands, going well.
His leader, Chris Luxon, has paid tribute to Mr Bridges, saying he's made an immense contribution. Rescue teams in Ukraine's northwestern region of Resna have been searching for people trapped in rubble after Russian airstrikes on a television tower. The regional governor said 9 people had been killed and 9 others wounded. The Ukrainian capital, Kiev, has also been coming under heavy shelling. The BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
Tonight in Kiev there have been constant explosions on the edge of the city, like rolling thunder. And Monday morning was very noisy. A lot of Russian artillery fire, louder than we've heard it before. But there was also a lot of Ukrainian firing surface-to-air missiles. 20 days on, this is a brutal war and a deepening humanitarian catastrophe.
About 4,000 Ukrainians will be allowed to join their family members in New Zealand under a special visa scheme. Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy announced the policy as Europe grapples with a rapidly growing refugee crisis driven by Russia's war on Ukraine. Successful applicants will be granted a 2-year visa with work or study rights, and children will be able to attend school. A Christchurch mosque attack survivor had an emotional welcome this afternoon to Al Noor Mosque, 3 years on from the deadly attack. Tamil Atachuju arrived at the same time the gunman opened fire in 2019, shooting him 9 times and killing 51 others. Today he had reached the end of a gruelling 15-day walk, retracing the journey the terrorist took from Dunedin to Christchurch.
I got shot 9 times, so 3 years later I'm here now, and I want to show to the strength and faith and unity, and we are one, and terrorist is nil.
Tamil Atachuju has raised over $60,000 for children and youth charities during his walk. Commuters will together save millions of dollars in bus, train and ferry tickets when public transport fares are halved across the country for 3 months from April. Auckland accounts for half the fares, but the pandemic has put the brakes on public transport patronage in the city, which is a third what it was in 2019. Auckland Transport Group Manager of Metro Services, Stacey Vanderputten, says lower fares should help to encourage people back onto public transport. It's unclear whether the Waiheke Island and Devonport ferry services or the Wellington cable car are included in the fare reduction. To sport, and the South Auckland weightlifter David Leti isn't only carrying the weight of defending his gold medal, but the desire to leave a legacy when he competes at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Leti won gold in the 105kg division at the 2018 Gold Coast Games, setting a Games record in the process. He's one of 7 weightlifters and 6 lawn bowls para-athletes who were the first athletes named for Birmingham today. Leti says the prospect of back-to-back gold medals is hugely motivating.
Putting my name down there in history, and hopefully in the future I can use my name or do something with it, or for not just for myself but for my team, my people and my family.
The Games begin on July 28th. Midway through the second half of the Super Rugby Aupiki match between the Chiefs Manawa and the Hurricanes Paua in Hamilton, the home side leads 17-18. The Manawa have scored 3 tries to 1 in stifling conditions, with the match being played in 27-degree heat. The Wellington Phoenix will be without captain Alex Rufer for the remainder of the A-League football season after scans confirmed he's ruptured knee ligaments. And the Australian golfer Cameron Smith has claimed the PGA Tour's biggest payout, pocketing over $5 million after a one-shot victory at the Players' Championship in Florida. His New Zealand caddy, Sam Pinfold, gets $500,000 of that. That's the news.
Fighting in Ukraine continues.
This absolutely ghastly siege of Mariupol continues, with people running out of food, water, medicine.
We mark the mosque attacks 3 years on.
I've become more proud of my faith.
My life is a gift. It's a gift that I was given on 15 March.
And prices at the pump drop.
Come down to a pretty high low, as it were. I just dropped out to Waitomo on Thorndon, 273 there.
Your daily fill-up. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. But first, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland to the Kapiti Coast, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Mainly fine, isolated showers north of Huntly, retreating to northern parts of Northland tomorrow morning, possibly heavy during the afternoon. Gisborne and the Wairoa district, rain easing to showers tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Hawke's Bay, also Wairarapa, Wellington and the Marlborough Coast and Sounds, mostly cloudy with showers. For the remainder of Marlborough, also for Nelson, fine weather. Bulla, partly cloudy with isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, isolated showers south of the glaciers, mainly afternoon and evenings. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy. A few showers clearing this afternoon or evening, but persisting about South Canterbury and North Otago until tomorrow afternoon. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, low cloud, occasional light rain or drizzle, that's clearing later tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. Our next news headlines are at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Stalling booster rates are worrying health chiefs who say people shouldn't consider themselves fully vaccinated unless they've had their 3rd dose. The number of COVID-19 infections has edged up again with 21,616 new community cases and 2 deaths. 960 people are in hospital with the virus, 22 of them are in ICU or HDU. Jean Edwards reports.
It's become a popular pandemic catchphrase and one the Director General of Health is fond of repeating.
The most important thing anyone can do is to make sure they are vaxxed to the max.
That means getting a booster shot, but there are still 950,000 eligible New Zealanders who aren't vaxxed to the max. Dr Ashley Bloomfield says people shouldn't consider themselves fully vaccinated if they haven't had 3 doses.
Really what we should be talking about is being up to date with vaccinations, and it's quite clear now for Omicron, being up to date means having 3 doses, period.
Data shows 84% of people admitted to Auckland hospitals for COVID-19 over a 2-week period hadn't had their booster. Dr Bloomfield has drawn parallels with road safety campaigns as part of the vaccination drive.
Just as seatbelts greatly reduce the risk that you will get seriously injured or die in a motor vehicle crash, vaccination greatly reduces the risk that you will get seriously unwell or die from being infected with COVID-19.
Auckland University epidemiologist Rod Jackson says 3 doses must be considered a full course because the vaccine's effectiveness against Omicron wanes after 2.
It's a complete no-brainer getting the 3rd dose. It's an extremely important thing to do, and it concerns me a lot that New Zealanders are not doing this. You are much better off getting vaccinated by a 3rd dose of the vaccine than getting vaccinated by Omicron. It's a very brutal way of vaccinating yourself.
He says people should have to have 3 doses to hold a vaccine pass, along with anyone coming into the country.
Fully vaccinated, if you're eligible, means 3 doses. And I wouldn't allow any visitors into the country without 3 doses if they're eligible.
As the Omicron wave rolls down the country, Wellington is now in the grip of what Dr Bloomfield calls a pretty full-on outbreak. And he warns it's likely to have a long tail.
It may well be that we're seeing anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 cases a day still in New Zealand for some weeks, even into months.
So it's never too late to get vaxxed to the max.
It is 5:10. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The UN Secretary-General says the prospect of nuclear conflict is now within the realm of possibility as the invasion of Ukraine continues. Russian forces are tightening their grip on a number of cities and inching closer to the capital, Kiev. A convoy of private cars has made its way out of the Black Sea port city of Mariupol, but is still a long way from its destination. Andrew McRae reports.
Mariupol continues to be surrounded by Russian forces and is getting more grim by the hour for residents. It's been called the biggest humanitarian crisis in a war full of them. It's a place with no electricity, water and a severe shortage of food and medicine, and at least 1,000 residents have been killed. The International Committee for the Red Cross says time is quickly running out for the besieged city. Its European director, Martin Schupp, says life in Mariupol is desperate.
And every day they have to scramble to find something to survive on. And the longer the situation lasts, the more people's lives are at critical risk.
Ukrainian MP Dmitry Gurin grew up in Mariupol and is in contact with people there.
There is a medieval siege now in the city, and hunger is going to break out. Mariupol is totally in the full siege. All the roads and fields around the city are mined. There is no heating, electricity, water, gas, or mobile network is available like 1-2 hours during the day. And Russian troops have command to kill everybody trying to escape.
President Zelensky says help's on the way for Mariupol, but only if it can get through.
Our humanitarian convoy is 2 hours away, with only 80 kilometers remaining. We're doing everything possible to fight the resistance of the occupants, who block even the Orthodox Church priests who are escorting the convoy with food, water, medication. Ukraine has supplied 100 tons of the basic necessities for its citizens.
And President Zelensky has issued another dire warning to the West off the back of the Russian attack on the base near the Polish border.
Nothing was happening there that could threaten the territory of the Russian Federation. And NATO's borders are only 20 kilometers away. And now I repeat again, if you do not close our skies, it is only a matter of time before Russian missiles fall on your territory, on NATO territory, on the homes of citizens of NATO countries.
Mr. Zelensky described ongoing discussions between Ukraine and Russia as complicated and difficult, but necessary for peace and security. He visited wounded soldiers recovering at a military hospital, telling them it's important they get better. Meanwhile, Russian forces are getting closer to the capital, Kyiv, and only about 15 kilometres away in some places. Local people are preparing to defend their city to the bitter end. Yuri, who lives in Kyiv, has abandoned his business to take up a gun.
And I wanted to say to all the Russians that all the streets, all these houses, entrances, roofs, basement will be obstacle, will be ambush for them. And Kyiv will be the total cemetery for them. Only thing they'll receive, it will be the mass grave for them.
The reported request by Russia for military equipment from China complicates matters further. The US has warned China that it would absolutely face consequences if it was found to be helping Russia evade Western sanctions. Just 2 weeks ago, the two countries declared that their partnership had no limits, something it may be about to put to the test.
He stared down numerous contenders and saw off many an adversary. Now Simon Bridges is saying goodbye. In a shock move, the former National leader has announced he is retiring from politics to explore opportunities in the corporate world and spend more time with his family. Bridges' departure will spark a by-election in the Tauranga electorate. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
A political bruiser, a battler, a brawler, now bowing out of Parliament. Simon Bridges is leaving the ring.
I'm going to look back actually with fondness at the good times, at achievements, but also at the roller coaster that is New Zealand politics.
And what a roller coaster it's been. Bridges entered Parliament in 2008, a young gun and up-and-comer. He beat Winston Peters on his home turf Tauranga, turfing out New Zealand first.
It's been particularly high profile, and that's obviously an exciting, interesting way to start. I hope it's not my finest moment.
It wasn't. He went on to be Minister of Transport, Energy and Economic Development under then Prime Minister John Key. But it was in opposition Bridges made his mark on the party, taking the top job in 2018 and embracing a combative attack dog style.
Slushies! Grant Robertson drank them all! Strike Force Raptor. Strike Force Raptor! Ah!
So you would have stayed in for a fortnight then?
Can I please just answer Susie?
His tenure was dogged by turmoil and treachery within his caucus.
Simon is a flawed individual without a moral compass.
We are talking about a guy who's lying, who's leaking.
I'm not interested in opposition for opposition's sake.
What we saw yesterday was truly desperate stuff from Judith Collins.
And while his strong Kiwi accent attracted attention, it was his tongue which sometimes got him in trouble.
2 Chinese would be nice, but then, would it be 1 Chinese and 1 Filipino?
This is a blunt conversation that we were having.
Like Maureen Pugh's useless.
I engaged in some old wives' tales about that and how to have a girl. I regret what I said.
No stranger to scandal then, but Simon Bridges says there's none to be found this time. No secret skeletons in closets.
Absolutely not. If there was, I'd probably stay and tough it out. There just isn't.
He says it's simply his time to go. His eyes now on the corporate world and, as the cliche goes, wants to spend more time with his family.
All politicians are still human, and mums and dads often too.
His departure is a serious blow to a party just building momentum, National pulling ahead of Labour in the latest poll. Bridges' exit now threatens to derail that. He's one of the most experienced members of caucus, currently in the Plum finance portfolio.
We're going to miss him tremendously, but ultimately this is a decision for Simon, and he's owed that.
For now, Christopher Luxon is batting off concerns for the party, though he has a test coming with the by-election now looming in Tauranga. A true blue seat, National should hold on to it. But as the first race under Luxon's leadership, it will be hotly contested and closely watched.
And departing National MP Simon Bridges joins us now. Kia ora, Simon.
Hey, kia ora, Lisa.
Simon, what have you done?
No, I've chosen life, I suppose, Lisa. I mean, look, it's time. I feel like there's never a good time for these things, but it's as good as it gets for National. We're on the upswing. We've got momentum. I'm 45. I'm keen to explore some other opportunities. And the reality is, look, this week, my 3 children, 2 of them turned 10 and 8. They've never known Daddy to be anything other than MP who goes away to a place called Parliament. And I'm looking forward to having a bit more normality for them and waking up in the same bed every night.
We know how
every day, morning, I should say.
Yeah, we know how this goes, Simon. That is the speech that a lot of people give when they've done something dodgy, dishonest, embarrassing, or unethical. So I'm just going to ask you: have you done anything that falls into that category that we're going to find out about in a couple of weeks' time?
No, definitely not. And I heard your clip, and I mean, it's the truth. I appreciate. I've been a conviction politician. I've been a characterful politician, to put it mildly. And, I've had my ups and downs and my highs and lows, but there's no reason other than the ones I'm giving you for what's happening. I mean, it's both a sad and exciting time for me. Sad to be leaving colleagues, actually leaving a job I still love. I love being a member of Parliament.
So didn't you think you were going to be Finance Minister next year? Because that would be worth sticking around for, wouldn't it?
Look, it would. And, as I say, that's part of the sadness. I think, it's one of the great roles of government and would have been a huge privilege. But I sit there and I've weighed the pros and cons. I thought about this over the summer. And some days, frankly, I woke up and thought, I still want to be in politics. But more often than not, between Natalie, my wife, and I, as we've talked about it, we felt it was time, and I'm looking forward to the opportunities ahead of me. I'll look on. I'll be cheering for National from the sidelines, and maybe I will be jealous of that next finance minister, but I've made my decision.
Okay, so outside of your wife and Christopher Luxon, was the next person? Did you call Maureen Pugh and let her know you were heading off?
I told my colleagues this morning. I think there's a reasonably well-worn path in terms of how members of Parliament go about this. For the most part, nearly all of my colleagues learned this morning, and it's a bit like watching your own funeral. People start saying nice things about you, and that's very kind.
Do they mean it?
Well, I hope so. I hope so, Lisa.
So you're selling up your family home in Tauranga. Are you Auckland bound?
It's a time of change. I've lived in Tauranga for 22 years by 45, so fundamentally my adult life. It's certainly not goodbye to Tauranga. My mum's there. My wife Natalie has a business there. We're working these things through. I think the best I can say to you is the truth, which is I am exploring commercial opportunities, and it is a big world out of there. I certainly intend to continue having a home in Tauranga, though, because, look, I love the city, I love the beaches, and I can certainly see myself, whether it's there full-time or not, but spending time in Tauranga.
But yours is a pretty speedy exit by political standards, right? So have you already signed the contract for your new gig?
I am telling you what the reality is, which is I'm exploring commercial opportunities, and who knows, maybe
have you been offered a job, Simon?
Media.
Have you offered a job?
Media. When I have details, I'll let you know, but I don't have details for you at this time.
All right, so we're almost out of time, so a couple of things. Can you pick something from your office that you're going to give to Judith Collins when you leave?
Well, right in front of me, I have a model of Big Ben, the clock tower. I don't know if that's something that she might like, but actually it might go well in my new office desk when I eventually get the new roles you're so interested in.
Okay, so on that new role, I mean, it's not often that we give you a chance to promote yourself, so here we go. Just imagine that this is a radio promo, Simon, so you get counted in and then you get cued. So I'm going to give you the lead in, and then you're going to finish the promo for us. Are you ready? Standing by for your cue?
Yeah.
All right. Tonight on A Bridges Too Far, the issues that matter. Cue, Simon, go.
Yeah, I think actually I learned a lot of my time in Parliament. As I said, I've been a characterful politician. I haven't got it all right, but it's been a great privilege. I've enjoyed, I think, actually all of it. I'll miss it, but it's time for me. And I'll be looking on from afar, knowing that politics is important, it matters, but people can make contribution in a bunch of other areas, and that's what I'm going to do.
So which channel should we turn to see you?
Again...
come on, you're not a politician. You're a politician going out. Give us a straight answer, Simon.
It's been great to talk to you, and as you know, you're one of my favourites.
Yeah, right. Got to go, Simon. Thanks for your time. That is National MP Simon Bridges. The cost of taking a train, bus or ferry will soon be temporarily halved to help counter the rising cost of living, but not all commuters expect to rake in the savings. Public transport fares around the country will be cut by 50% for 3 months from April until the end of June. But it's unclear whether this includes the Waiheke Island and Devonport ferry services or the Wellington cable car. Amy Williams reports.
A one-way ticket to Waiheke Island is $21, but buy a monthly pass and you're talking hundreds of dollars. Resident Chloe Barker would save more than $150 a month if the fare's halved, and wants the ferry operator Fullers to take part in the fare reduction.
Given that the Waiheke community supports their business throughout the year when sometimes tourism drops off, I think it would be a really nice thing for them to look into further.
Ferry operator Fullers is not part of the public transport network and does not receive government funding. But Ms Barker says it's time to reduce the ferry fares.
I've seen people moving off the island because of the rising cost of living. They're losing their whole community. Some people have been living here for their whole life, and they're being forced to move with the cost of living. And a large part of that often is the ferry cost.
Fuller's Chief Commercial Officer, Tim O'Halloran, says the company supports the fare reduction for public transport for 3 months and has asked government if the move includes its services. Auckland Transport says that's out of its hands. Here's its Group Manager of Metro Services, Stacey van der Putten.
At the moment, it would seem that the Devonport and the Waiheke services are exempt from this 50% discount because it doesn't receive any public funding.
She says the combined savings for commuters over the 3 months will be in the millions. They're crunching the numbers now.
It's a decent saving in terms of that. I mean, taking into consideration we do have substantially reduced customers currently, given the current Omicron outbreak, but we'll see that return, and so that'll determine, I guess, in terms of what those savings look like.
The pandemic has put the brakes on public transport patronage in the supercity. It's a third of what it was in 2019. Even so, those who commute into the city say the cost savings, however minor, will make a difference.
Yeah, I guess it's a good start. I mean, there are probably other things they can do for cost of living, but yeah, probably grocery prices would be the biggest one, yeah.
It means a lot. I can put more towards food, bills, things like that. But I think in general public transport should be cheaper.
The more expensive things are things like groceries and bills, so it's definitely not like going to make a huge amount available, but anything is better than nothing.
For those living in areas without public transport, the government has temporarily pulled 25 cents a litre off its fuel excise duty and told the petrol companies to pass it on. The capital city's Metlink network is included in the half-price fares. Greater Wellington Chair Darren Ponter says it should help to boost patronage.
It's a huge boon for commuters and potentially a means, temporarily at least, of attracting people out of their cars into public transport.
But he says it's not clear yet if the cable car and Kiwi Rail's Capital Connection, which runs weekdays between Palmerston North and Wellington, will be included in the reduction. However, those buying paper tickets could find a happy loophole.
We've also got a rather antiquated Victorian ticketing system in Wellington where people still use paper tickets. And so one of the things we're having to consider is if you drop prices for those paper tickets and people buy a weekly pass, does that mean that they can buy a bundle of weekly passes for the next 5 years and get them discounted?
As for longer-term fare reductions, Darren Ponter says he's waiting on the Climate Change Commission's recommendations due late May.
Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Do you reckon those ferry services, Waiheke and Devonport, should have half-price tickets too? And also let us know if that cut in the price of a public transport trip is going to encourage you out of the car and onto the bus or the ferry or the train. Pātui mai, text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And speaking of travel, the stampede is on for passports, but beware, you may have to wait. After 2 years of border restrictions, New Zealanders can now travel offshore and return without having to isolate as long as they are fully vaccinated. And of course, have a passport, and that might not be as straightforward as you may imagine. Joining us now is Maria Robertson from the Department of Internal Affairs. Kia ora, Maria. What kind of demand are you seeing for passports?
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. Look, firstly, we're always delighted to get passports into people's hands. It's the critical thing, isn't it? And it's a beautiful little black book that we're all very proud of. it's been an interesting couple of years. Up until the border announcements were made earlier last month, we were seeing really suppressed demand. So we were only issuing around 12,500 passports a month. That increased over February to about 19,000, and we expect to issue about 30,000 in March, coming up through the balance of the month. But at our peak, before COVID struck us, we were issuing about 61,500 passports a month. So, this is a business we're good at. We run a world-class service, and we're expecting that to continue.
So even at your peak coming out of the border restrictions, you'll still only be processing about half the amount before COVID. What's the kind of wait? How long do you have to wait to get your passport at the moment?
It's about 20 days, and we're saying 20 days just to provide a little bit of a buffer. We've got, of course, the convergence of a couple of things. We've had really suppressed demand for a couple of years. I mean, at one stage during the height of lockdowns and things, we were only issuing about 13% of the passport demand that we would ordinarily have had without COVID in our midst.
So did you redeploy those staff, Maria? Sorry to interrupt, but did you redeploy staff to other areas when you had that big slump in demand?
We did. We also had a number of temporary staff, and of course, when that's partly why you have a flexible workforce with temps. Also, some of our staff chose to leave the organisation and retire. We had some kind of long-term staff, but we've certainly taken the opportunity to look at our organisation and see where we can keep making improvements to keep delivering world-class services. So we've deployed a number of staff, but also, we've had other demand in other areas. Birth registration still happens and other things. So, yeah, we're certainly busy, but we've got the convergence of the other factor, which is around about 40% of our staff are actually either isolating at home and well, or they're isolating at home and they're unwell with COVID. So we've got a depleted workforce as well, like most other organisations.
40%, that's a lot. The well ones, are they able to do their work from home?
Look, we're very careful about people's privacy and security, and we hold the data that's actually taonga for people, and the implications of identity theft and fraud are really hard for people. It's quite a shock, and it's something that most commentators would agree you never fully recover from if you have identity theft and fraud. Also, the security and privacy of the New Zealand passport and the environments that we work in and that our staff work in, that goes to New Zealanders' visa-free access or visa-guaranteed access to 186 countries, which we also don't want to compromise. So we've got some opportunities for people to do some work remotely, but we tend to operate entirely from our controlled environments to keep people's data safe and secure.
Right. We're almost out of time. There's a couple of things people will want to know, though. We've been told some individuals who applied for a passport were told 16 days wait, and now it's 20 days. Could that get longer?
Look, I think it'll probably sit around that 20 days at the moment, and my advice to people is to look ahead, see what your plans are, and get your passport application into us online. Make sure everything's really straightforward, and that makes the whole process quicker.
And if you need one for an emergency, can you still get a fast-tracked option?
Yeah, we still have an urgent service that costs people a lot more. So the thing with it is, only use that urgent service if it's really urgent. And there are some genuine cases of that. And we've had one today, for example, with a customer needing to get over to the UK urgently. But if people look ahead and plan, get the application into us, we'll assess it, we'll do all the things we normally do. But if people can allow about 20 days, that should be totally fine.
Thanks for joining us, Maria. That's Maria Robertson from the Department of Internal Affairs. E te iwi e haere nei e a checkpoint. A change in pace could be coming for Auckland. Speeds on about 1,600 roads are under review. A survivor of the mosque terror attacks completes an epic journey, and the yacht that's going nowhere fast. Homai o whakaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know what's on your mind. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Anei a iwi mina pita kōrero.
The term fully vaccinated will now mean 3 vaccination shots. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says previously fully vaccinated meant 2 vaccine doses and a booster shot. He says the move referring to 3 doses means a change in the way health authorities talk about vaccinations. 73% of eligible people have had 3 shots, but there are nearly 950,000 who haven't had a 3rd dose. Meanwhile, there's been a jump in the daily number of COVID-19 cases recorded today, with 21,616 new community cases, just over 6,000 more than yesterday. There are also 2 more deaths, taking the total during the pandemic to 117. National Party MP Simon Bridges believes the party will retain his Tauranga seat as he retires from politics. After 14 years in Parliament, Mr Bridges says he wants to pursue commercial opportunities and spend more time with his young family. He says traditionally Tauranga has been a strong seat for National. National leader Chris Luxon says the party's candidate selection process for the Tauranga by-election will begin in the coming weeks. A man has been convicted and disqualified from driving for a year after a fatal crash on the Napier-Taupo Road a year and a half ago. 20-year-old Nick York was driving a van carrying seasonal workers in October 2020 when he stopped to turn right into a cafe. The Crown prosecutor, Clayton Walker, told the Napier District Court today that if York had looked in his rearview mirror or over his shoulder, he would have seen the truck that hit his van. York received life-threatening injuries and the front seat passenger died. And the ACT Party says the New Zealand Defence Force has 24 Javelin missile launchers that could be put to good use to help Ukraine defend itself from Russia. Meanwhile, the government has boosted aid funding to Ukraine by $4 million and is introducing a new visa for the families of Ukrainian New Zealanders. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e hoa nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona, business insolvencies are expected to pick up in the second half of the year. I mean, is this all down to COVID?
Not just COVID, it's a number of other factors, but certainly COVID hasn't helped. And it's mostly because of the border closed to international tourists and so on. That's had a flow-on effect through a number of different sectors that are affected indirectly or directly because of tourism. And specifically, for example, if you looked at, say, Lower Queen Street in Auckland, where the cruise ships used to come, that particular part of the city is pretty, a lot of empty shops, let's just put it that way. But whether or not insolvencies have picked up so far, they haven't. So I spoke with a few people today, and the idea here is that a lot of companies are just biding their time, hoping for that light at the end of the tunnel, hoping that tomorrow what it brings is some kind of a date on when international tourists return. And in the meantime, they're tackling things such as inflation, high interest rates, tight labor market. Well, you name it, there's a lot of issues there. And of course, Omicron keeping a lot of people off the street.
And Nona, well, another story that's kind of on the negative side as well. The services sector has contracted for the 7th consecutive month. So what are those numbers?
Some of them are pretty ugly, to be honest. I think, for example, when we talk about a services index, we talk about 50 being expansion and anything below 50 being contraction. So we're at 48.6. Now that's well below our long-term average of just above 53. Some of the reasons for that is a drop in some of the particular, these are services. So for example, cafes, restaurants, accommodation, they're at the lowest reading really ever out of 11.2. So remembering 50 is expansion, 11.2 is definitely contraction. Not just that, but for example, cultural and recreational, personal service, that sort of thing, 20.8. These are really low numbers and indicate just how deep that contraction in those service sectors are. But overall, it also shows us that this is the way the economy looks today. So the first quarter of this financial year suggests a real downturn in economic conditions where services sector are concerned.
Lace up your shoes, Nona. Let's take a trot around the markets.
Let's do that. Okay, well, the NZX Top 50 Index, it closed down just less than a handful of points, just 3, to 11,802. And the New Zealand dollar is steady at 67.4 US cents, 93.9 Australian and 51.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with business news. A lot of you getting in touch about Simon Bridges' abrupt departure from politics. Pat says, I'm sorry to hear of Simon Bridges' departure. He was a likeable MP and chaired the COVID committee well. May he enjoy a happy new opportunity, says Pat. A few of you, though, aren't happy about the fact that he's forcing a by-election and the costs of that. Alan says MPs have a contract to see out their term unless there is a good reason, for example, health, to resign. Arguably, given the costs of a by-election, the seat should otherwise be left empty and a list MP fill the gap until the next election. Do keep feedback coming 2101 on text. Aucklanders may soon have to take their foot off the gas permanently on more than 1,600 roads across the city. Nearly 1,000 of them are around 82 schools in the city, and a move Auckland Transport says will help children get to school safely. Our reporter Louise Tenuth and cameraman Nick Monroe joined the school run.
It's school drop-off time here at Takapuna Primary. Parents, kids, scooters and bikes are out in force, and of course cars.
Oh, it's mayhem. It's gridlock all the way out the sides, people trying to find parking all the way, so yeah, it does get quite busy.
This is an area AT's suggesting needs slowing down. Vehicles would be limited to 30 k's an hour here, something these parents are all for.
Probably even lower when there's a school crossing or you find a bus, you slow it down to 20 even.
It is very busy. There's not enough spaces for everyone to park at sometimes, especially at pick-up time. Drop-offs are easier, but sometimes I think people are just thinking about where am I going to park and they don't really pay attention to other factors around when they're driving. I think that's when they forgot about the speed limits and to watch for kids and people crossing streets.
Principal Devika Tag wants to see the speed drop too.
It's in the middle of a busy town centre, so we often hear a lot of cars on our roads. It is a busy time.
Takapuna is one of the main town centres being considered by Auckland Transport to change from mostly a 50 kilometre to 30 kilometre speed zone. But it doesn't include Kalani Street, a main busy street that Takapuna Primary sits on. But the principal is still confident it will make a difference.
We've got 5 different entrances to the school. Kalani is one of them. It's certainly one that a lot of parents use, but we've got multiple entrances to the school. That's going to help, I think.
Auckland Transport is looking at changing around 1,646 roads. 980 of these are based around schools in Auckland, 415 are rural roads, including a staggering 90% of roads on Waiheke Island. Another key aspect is roads in town centres like Glen Innes and Takapuna, and there's 18 roads that are up for proposal around rural marae.
Manager of the Safe Speeds program at Auckland Transport, Nathan Kamek, says their biggest goal is to improve safety.
But where we have reviewed speeds, we've seen a really big benefit in road trauma. So we've seen fatalities on those roads drop by almost 50%, so by 47%, and as I mentioned on the rural roads by 70%.
And while roads around schools make up most of those earmarked for change, the new speeds would be in place 24/7.
So the school zone at the moment just operates around those school pick-up and drop-off times. But one thing we've really heard from our consultation last year, and myself being a local around here, my experience is the schools are not just used, before and after school. They're used on the weekends for kind of rollerblading or basketball, and they can become a bit of a hub of the community.
Options like speed cameras or speed bumps being looked at to make sure the new limits can be enforced. The proposed changes have been met with mixed reaction from these locals.
It's a good idea, just safety of pedestrians, I guess, and just in fitting with the rest of the street,
I think the speed limit's fine. It's not, people don't really speed around here anyways. People are quite cautious, because they know that there's walkers, pedestrians and stuff. So.
I don't know. Does it cause more congestion then? I'm not sure. I mean, in close, I think it's fine, but it depends how far it extends, I guess.
Consultations are now open, and if the changes go ahead, they'll come into force by late this year.
If you were listening to that on radio, do check out the piece from Louise and Nick. It will be on our webpage, and it is 18 minutes to 6. If you're in Auckland, what do you think about that? 30 kilometres an hour on roads around schools, but 24/7 that would be in place. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A lot of you getting in touch about public transport and whether there should be half-price tickets to Waiheke and Devonport as well. Roland says, are the Waiheke helicopters half-price? But this person makes a valid point. To the half-price tickets to regular users on the Waiheke ferry, yes, as there is no other option. I have no opinion on holiday makers. When people think of Waiheke, they often think of the luxury side of things and the wealthy. But before it was a fancy destination and pricing people out of the market, it was the home of ordinary folk, and there are still many left there. Do keep feedback coming. Wellington businesses are being hit with another setback just 2 weeks after the capital came to a standstill because of the anti-mandate protest at Parliament. Locals told our reporter Somya Bamidi Party and cameraman Angus Drever that the Omicron outbreak has left an already quiet city practically mute.
Walking through Wellington's streets, it's clear the pandemic is taking its toll. While some shops are shut on what should be a busy weekday morning in the CBD, others are open but empty. Multiple stores have signs saying they've reduced their hours because of a staff shortage. Rose Taghoy works at the French Kiss Cafe in Post Office Square. She says it's been slow since Christmas.
It goes through like small movements of like being back to normal, and then suddenly it'll be pretty dead. Yeah, it's pretty quiet, and like when you're working in a caravan and stuff, you get to see the movement in the city pretty well, but it's very minimal.
Rose says the cafe was closed yesterday, COVID staffing problems forcing them to shut up shop. Lambton Goods owner Nayan Dyer says this is the quietest he's seen his store in the 2 decades it's been around.
We've been really quiet this turnaround since we went into red light. I think that it's the worst it's been since we've been open in 2002, and I think the February and March is one of our busiest months of the year, and it's been horrible.
Meanwhile, out on the streets of Wellington, people we spoke to say they've noticed the difference. And while it's already been a dull few years for local businesses, it seems to be getting worse.
Oh, it's deathly quiet. It's obviously there's a lot of people working from home, and so things like the coffee carts and which would normally be a queue and things like that. But no, it's very quiet, and I suppose it's a little bit disappointing for commercial businesses and restaurants and retailers in the area.
Some of them have, the managers coming out on the street just to kind of check what's going on, or just kind of, I imagine, waiting for people to come in. Yeah, or just trying to show that they are open.
I'm just going to meet my friend now, and we'll see what's open, and I'm sure we'll find something.
Are you worried that there won't be as much choice as previously?
Not really. I mean, we'll just find whatever we find, and we'll just go with the flow.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice just to try and support a little bit of the local, knowing that they're doing it tough.
Wellington Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Simon Arcus says the capital's been hit by a trifecta of troubles: the red light setting, the Omicron outbreak, and the recent anti-mandate protest. Is Wellington having it tougher than other parts of the country at the moment?
The stats told us that Wellington was suffering more as a main centre. So, for example, 50% down on the spending in the city, whereas other cities roughly about 25% at the same time.
He says the city has also been impacted by its high portion of public sector workers, most of whom are now working from home.
Look, the CBD, and you just need to walk through it on a normal day, is pretty moribund. A lot of businesses struggling because the CBD hasn't got people coming into that. That's professionals who are staying home and working from home. And also remember, we've got a very large public service footprint. With the public service out of the city, you've got nearly 40% of the activity potentially down. So we'd just love the public service back in the city when the time is right and when the settings are right.
Businesses here in the capital ready to see the foot traffic and buzz return to the city.
And the video version of that story will be on our webpage. Do check it out. Whangarei's on its own mission to bring people back into the CBD. Its parking meters are out of action for the next 6 weeks in a bid to lure people back. Omicron's keeping people away from Whangarei's shops at the moment, and with business hurting, the council's doing what it can to ease the pain. Anei te kairi poata and Nita Blake person.
It's not often a trip to the parking meter ends this positively.
It was a total surprise. Was just going to stop for a couple of minutes, went to go and get the cash. Free, so fabulous.
I just got here and I've read that no payment required, and the time limit resumes on 25th April, so I'm pretty excited.
Free parking brings me into the city more often, probably. I mean, it's only $2 for an hour, but I think that's great news. It's a small things in life, isn't it?
Today was a good day for many motorists in Whangarei. Last week, the District Council voted to wipe all parking fees for the next 6 weeks. Mayor Cheryl Mai says they're trying to soften Omicron's blow on businesses.
So wherever you had to pay parking in the past, it's free. The time limits still apply, but we just really want people to make the most of coming out and enjoying an unusual aspect of council giving away some of its income.
The move is costing ratepayers around $240,000 in lost parking revenue, but Mai hopes that will be earned back through a boost to business. And it's a boost she says they really need right now.
We were anticipating that these months of March and April were definitely going to be right down, because we are noticing that the streets are quieter, there are fewer vehicles, which makes it easier to manoeuvre. However, we also knew that fewer people means fewer dollars being spent in town.
Mike Powder runs Journey Studio in Whangarei and says town is very quiet at the moment. He's very supportive of the free parking.
It's the big hibernation, I guess. People are fearful and choosing not to come out. I don't know, it's just the ways and means of this pandemic we're living in, and you've sort of got to be willing to adapt to it.
He's definitely noticed the businesses that do have free parking keeping busy.
Even leading up to Christmas, we were experiencing some very quiet days in the CBD here, and then you would pop down to the warehouse and the place would be absolutely jam-packed, and it's that free parking that's just taking that hassle away.
Yvonne Clark is one of the owners of Cuppa Cakes in Whangarei. She's noticed how quiet things are too.
People are afraid of COVID. I think a lot of the older people that would normally come out and have coffee and cake are staying away. So I think it's a fair thing.
She says business is tough right now.
Small businesses are really struggling. I think if you have to go and have staff isolating even for 7 days, it's really hard on small businesses when you've only got 2 or 3 people.
There are more than 6,000 active COVID cases in Northland at the moment, with 21 people in hospital. Mayor Cheryl Mai is encouraging people to keep coming into town while wearing masks, scanning in and practicing good hygiene. And she wants people to make the most of the free parking, as she says it won't last beyond the 6-week period.
If we follow the trends of other centres, then the peak will be well and truly over and done with, and people will be more confident to come back, pay the small amount of parking fee that there is, and carry on with their business.
And as for Whangarei's parking wardens, well, they won't be having a 6-week holiday, with teams still out checking warrants, registration and time limits.
3 years since the Christchurch terror attacks left 51 worshippers dead and dozens injured. One survivor has completed a remarkable journey. Tamal Atatutu has walked from Dunedin to Christchurch to reclaim the stretch of road the gunman drove. Cameraman Nathan McKinnon and reporter Kim Moody joined him for the last leg.
A pit stop to refuel, replaster his torn feet and meet some fans. Gnarly blisters, aching muscles, rainfall and even a stint in hospital to treat a blood infection hasn't stopped Tamal Atatutu from meeting his goal. And what a goal! To reclaim the 360 kilometres from Dunedin to Christchurch the white supremacists took to commit an act of hatred in a walk of peace. Speaking to RNZ while bandaging his blistered feet, he spent about $80 on plasters in the past few days alone. His spirits were still high.
Oh, I feel amazing today. This is actually, I know it's not far away, and then missions impossible will complete it. But I hope, I make a good spark for everyone as carry on to this work for peace. I hope it's spread the whole country as soon as possible, and then from the New Zealand spread the all around the world.
The Epic Walk is fundraising for youngsters dealing with mental health distress. Through his Give a Little page, the money will go to Gumboot Friday, Save the Children and the Child Cancer Foundation. He's already raised more than $60,000.
Everybody needs a peace and peaceful life. And then especially our children and youths, they deserve a better life. We, as an adult, we must secure their life is much better than ours life.
Just before 20 to 1, he made it, covering 21 kilometres in one day. He received a hero's welcome at the Al Noor Mosque before taking a moment's silence to commemorate the 51 killed. Tamil was full of emotion.
3 years ago I was shot. First bullet in 140. And that's why I choose to arriving here this time. And I got shot 9 times, so 3 years later I'm here now, and I want to show to the strength and faith and unity, and we are one and terrorist is nil.
Then it was time to pray and reflect.
I feel nothing can stop me from completing this journey, because this is a pilgrimage, this is a sacrifice from me for peace and peaceful life.
COVID-19 cancelled today's public services, but several community-led initiatives were held to encourage people to support the Muslim community.
What a remarkable journey, and the footage filmed by Nathan McKinnon will be on our webpage. As is, where is one dilapidated former America's Cup yacht abandoned on Queenstown's Lake Wakatipu. Take it away. Queenstown Lakes District Council is looking for someone to get rid of NZL14 that was previously sailed by a Russell Cootes-led Team New Zealand. Bottom line, Anthony Hall from the Queenstown Lakes District Council says the mooring fees haven't been paid by the former owner, and she's literally been adrift.
Effectively, the vessel was deemed abandoned some time ago, and since then we have worked very hard to try and sell the vessel on the basis that we were hoping somebody that had an interest in the boat or in the yacht would be able to do something good with it. But unfortunately, anyone that's sort of come forward with some ideas around it has failed to follow through, and we're now in a position that we actually need to move it on. It's a bit of a risk it being there in the state that it's in, and it's just decaying further all the time.
What kind of state is it in? And when you say it's effectively abandoned, what does that mean?
So the previous owners, effectively, just for some further background, it came off its mooring a long time ago, and it was resecured to a mooring that we've got control over. And from that point, after engaging with the old owners, they've failed to reclaim the vessel. And at that point, we actually worked with them quite closely to see what options we had available, and we sought a court declaration just to confirm our interpretation of it being abandoned, so that way we can sell it or remove the vessel.
So it was literally adrift at one point?
It was.
And you say you've got a court declaration, so that's it. It's gone as far as it can, and you now have the right to get rid of it.
That's right. And like I say, it's taken a long time to get to the point we're at now, mainly because we were really trying to work with the very wide community to sell the vessel in the context of sale, transfer ownership to somebody. But anybody that did sort of look into it has found that a vessel of this nature is not that practical, like an ex-America's Cup yacht, but designed to be utilised in very particular wind constraints. That's not a general sail vessel, and the actual vessel itself, America's Cup yacht, it's not a yacht that most people would be using for sailing around. It's pretty basic.
Right, so you're after a specialist market, really. So is she pretty rickety?
I wouldn't say rickety, but it's certainly not up to a high standard anymore, and all the componentry in a vehicle like that needs to be perfect for it to operate in a good manner.
Not possible to sell it. So what, are you paying someone to get rid of it now?
That is our intention. We're going out to market to see if there's people with the right skill sets to effectively assist the QLDC to move it on. We're not dead sure exactly the end result will be, but if the best proposal is that it goes to landfill, that's certainly something we would be considering.
So how much has this cost you so far? Because I understand there are marina fees that are due, right?
There's significant costs. They're not like extraordinary.
Thousands?
I don't have the fees. Yeah, we're into the thousands.
Tens of thousands?
We're not the tens of thousands, so we're sort of in that low level of thousands. And yeah, they just keep adding up all the time. The boat, there's a cost to have any vessel, and at the moment the community's having to pay those fees.
Could you sink it and make it some kind of attraction?
There's been a significant number of great ideas of what could happen with that yacht. They all come with baggage. Effectively, to sink a vessel like that, there'd still need to be a lot of expense incurred to take out the motor, because there is a diesel motor in the yacht, and then there'd still be a whole process to go through. And yeah, some of these ideas are great, but we're really looking for, and we've given people opportunity to take the lead on something like that, and no one's sort of come through.
Sell it to us then, Anthony. Someone might be listening and thinking, oh yeah, hey, this is me. What's the deal?
Well, effectively the next stage, anyone that's interested in this process and has a genuine understanding of what's entailed in removing a vessel or bringing a vessel of this nature up to a very high standard can register their interest, and then from that point we'll be going out to the interested parties with a specific set of criteria around what we're looking for, and that'll be around experience, understanding of the yacht, and then what's involved in actually removing it from the lake and transporting it. The people that have been touching base with you at the moment, certainly most of them have understood this, like there needs to be cranes involved, heavy haulage, and where for it to be removed to.
But you want it gone, how soon?
We're looking for it to be as soon as possible, really. Within the next few weeks, we'll be going out to those interested parties and giving them a different opportunity to put a proposal together. And as part of that proposal, we'll be sort of asking them to tell us the timeframes in which they can remove it. There were interested parties at some point up in Auckland that it could have some historical value, but anybody that sort of showed that sort of interest never sort of followed through with things.
But to use a car sales term, it's basically as is, where is, yeah?
Yes.
And that's Anthony Hall from Queenstown Lakes District Council there.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The head of the NZSIS says she's concerned by an increase in violent anti-authority rhetoric in New Zealand. Rebecca Kitteridge was questioned by MPs at Parliament's Security and Intelligence Select Committee this afternoon. She says in the past year, the intelligence agency's counter-terrorism effort was split equally between white identity and faith-motivated violent extremism. Ms Kitteridge says a small number of politically motivated violent extremists in New Zealand are reacting to COVID-19 health measures.
It is assessed as probable that there are politically motivated violent extremists in New Zealand who have the intent to carry out a terrorist attack.
Rebecca Kitteridge says the NZSIS has investigated significant foreign interference efforts targeting politicians, media, academics and the private sector in the past year. The Director General of Health says from now on, fully vaccinated means 3 shots of the COVID-19 vaccine. Ashley Bloomfield says 3 doses are needed to fully protect people against being hospitalised and dying from Omicron. Previously, health authorities described fully vaccinated as 2 doses with a booster dose. But Dr Bloomfield says the way they talk about vaccinations will change. Health officials will now refer to being up to date with vaccinations, and for Omicron, that means 3 doses. 73% of eligible people have had 3 shots. Dr Bloomfield says recent figures from the northern region show 84% of people admitted to hospital for COVID had only 2 shots. Epidemiologist, Auckland University Professor Rod Jackson says 3 doses should be a vaccine pass requirement, as well as for people coming into the country.
They were designed ready for 2 doses, but they need to be upgraded. Fully vaccinated, if you're eligible, means 3 doses. And I wouldn't allow any visitors into the country without 3 doses if they're eligible.
The number of COVID-19 infections has risen again, with just over 21,616 new community cases and 2 deaths. The Greens co-leader says her party's COVID-19 spokesperson should have known better than to break self-isolation rules. Elizabeth Kirikiri flew from Gisborne to Wellington on Sunday, even though a household member had tested positive for the COVID virus 2 days earlier. She's now resigned from her COVID-19 portfolio and has been stood aside from the health portfolio. Co-leader Marama Davidson says Ms Kirikiri should have known the rules and showed poor judgment. She says the MP has apologised for the mistake. The National MP and former leader Simon Bridges says he's quitting politics and choosing life. He'll leave Parliament in the coming weeks. Mr Bridges has told Checkpoint he feels sad and excited to be leaving a job he loves, but he's 45 and keen to explore other opportunities. He says he also wants to be home more. Mr Bridges says there's no secret scandal behind his resignation.
I've been a conviction politician. I've been a characterful politician, to put it mildly. And, I've had my ups and downs and my highs and lows, but there's no reason other than the ones I'm giving you for what's happening.
Simon Bridges' departure forces a by-election in his Tauranga seat. A US assessment of the Russian campaign in Ukraine says that despite sustained bombing, almost all of Russia's advances have been stalled for several days. Russian forces have been moving closer to the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. This woman, who works at one of the city's subway stations, says they're prepared for a siege.
We are ready as usual, and we are ready for any situation that might happen. We are ready to host 1,300 people. This is the capacity of our station. However, if more people will need to hide here, we will host everyone who needs this.
Commuters will together save millions of dollars in bus, train and ferry tickets when public transport fares are halved across the country for 3 months from April. Auckland accounts for half the fares, but the pandemic has put the brakes on public transport patronage in the city, which is a third what it was in 2019. Amy Williams reports.
Auckland Transport Group Manager of Metro Services, Stacey van der Putten, says lower fares should help to encourage people back onto public transport. But it's unclear whether the Waiheke Island and Devonport ferry services or the Wellington cable car are included in the fare reduction. Ferry operator Fuller's Chief Commercial Officer Tim O'Halloran says the company supports the 3-month fare reduction and has asked the government if the move includes its services.
And in sport, the Chiefs are 2 from 2 in Super Rugby Aupiki. The Manawa have pulled clear in the second half for a 29-8 win over the Hurricanes Paua in Hamilton. The Hurricanes were playing their first match after their original opening game had to be postponed due to a COVID outbreak in the squad. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Louise Richards and John Overton discuss the geography of wine. It's as much about the people as it is about plants. If you want to know when someone's spiking your drinks, the BBC World Service is on your case. And then we're back on the vine with McDiarmid Institute Associate Investigator Nate Davis and scientifically plausible scenarios involving a certain jack and a giant beanstalk. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen and Checkpoint shortly. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland to the Kapiti coast, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Mainly fine, isolated showers north of Huntly, retreating to northern parts of Northland tomorrow morning, possibly heavy during the afternoon. Gisborne and the Wairoa district, rain easing to showers tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Hawke's Bay, also for Wairarapa, Wellington and the Marlborough coast and Sounds, mostly cloudy with showers. For the remainder of Marlborough, also Nelson, fine weather. Bulla, partly cloudy with isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine. Isolated showers south of the glaciers, mainly in the afternoons and evenings. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy. A few showers clearing this afternoon or evening, but persisting about South Canterbury and North Otago until tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, low cloud, occasional light rain or drizzle, clearing later tomorrow. That's the weather forecast. We'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi, Evie, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. About 4,000 Ukrainians could be offered safe haven in New Zealand under a special sponsorship scheme that would allow them to live here for 2 years. From today, so-called sponsors can apply to bring their immediate family, including parents, siblings and children, from war-torn Ukraine to Aotearoa as long as they're able to financially support them. Qualifying sponsors basically need to have been born in the Ukraine or have Ukrainian citizenship, but must also be a New Zealand resident or citizen. The government estimates about 1,600 people will qualify as sponsors. Ukrainian Olga Zazenko lives in Dunedin and joins us now. Kia ora, Olga. What do you think of this announcement?
Kia ora. So it's great that Ukrainians can bring their relatives to New Zealand, but from my point of view, it's a little bit unfair decision. Because there are a lot of Ukrainians in New Zealand who are on visas or waiting for their residency or waiting for the opportunity to apply for residency, and they already think that New Zealand is their home. They do not have such kind of opportunity, but they're in the same situation as other Ukrainians, so they also have relatives who are in fire now or who has to run from the war, and they have nobody to go to except that people in New Zealand.
So, Olga, you have to be a New Zealand citizen or a resident. Does your visa mean you qualify to bring relatives here or not?
No, I'm on work visa. I'm on work visa and I'm waiting for my residency, but now I'm not eligible for that. So, yeah, it's a little bit, stressful for me.
Last time we talked to you, Olga, your mother and mother-in-law had escaped to Poland, but your husband's 2 children were still in Ukraine. How is everybody doing?
They're okay, as I can say that in that situation somebody can be okay. So our moms are waiting for the decision. We're waiting for the decision. And, they're staying in Poland, and we do not know how long they can stay in that house they were offered to stay in. And we have to find something else, and nobody knows how long it will take to move them from one home to another. And it's a worse and worse situation in Poland, especially because more and more refugees came from Ukraine. And children are also they're still in Kyiv, but they're searching for the way how to escape the city.
So, Olga, if you could speak to the Minister for Immigration, what would you say to him about the visa? Who should be allowed to sponsor Ukrainians to come to New Zealand?
So I would ask to review this decision and to add to this list Ukrainians on other visas, because we are part of this community, of New Zealand community. We pay taxes, we contribute to New Zealand economy, well-being, to community. I would ask him to put us also in this list of people who can bring their relatives.
So a Ukrainian living here on the right visa can sponsor family members, so maybe their parents or their brothers and sisters. And we're told by the Minister's office that you can bring as many people as long as you are able to support them. How challenging do you think that will be for Ukrainians here in New Zealand who maybe have larger families who are then going to have to find the finances to look after the people that they are bringing?
Yeah, it's another question, because we didn't find the information how we can confirm that we can sponsor our families. And another side of this, that not many Ukrainians can sponsor their families now, because, our families has to leave everything and to run. For example, my mom, she just took her passport and run. So we have nothing now in Ukraine especially. And I think that the situation with COVID was not so good for Ukrainians and for all people, it was hard to find a job or to find a good job. So it's also tricky point of this.
So people may need help to get here and help
Yes.
to cover the cost of living here.
Yes, of course. Of course, it would be the great help if we can have this help.
So the visa would allow them to stay here in New Zealand for 2 years. Do you think that is long enough, Olga?
No, I do not believe that this war will finish soon. And, for example, for elder relatives such as moms and dads, so they're 70 plus, I even do not know how they can come back, and I even do not know whether we will have our house in Ukraine. So it could be shooted or bombed, and we can. Our moms can come back, and they will not find their homes. So it's also a tricky question. But I believe that 2 years is quite long to create something for New Zealanders. For Ukrainians in New Zealand, and to find solution for such kind of people.
Thank you for joining us, Olga. We wish your family all the best. That is Olga Zavdenko, who's speaking to us from Dunedin. Tourism operators are hopeful the border could be open in time for Aussies to eat our hot cross buns this Easter. The Prime Minister is due to announce plans to fast-track the reopening of the border tomorrow. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton has more.
It's been a long time coming, and the industry is on tenterhooks waiting for the borders to reopen. The current plan to welcome Aussies and other visa waiver countries in July and October for the rest of the world has been frustrating. After losing 3/4 of gas in one fell swoop, EcoZip Adventures co-founder Gavin Oliver is ready for some good border news. His wish list is to be welcoming Australians back to his Waiheke Island business during their school holidays next month.
Inevitably, there are always rumours. At the moment, we're hearing about the 15th of April for isolation-free travel from Australia, and then about 2 weeks later for the rest of the world. If that were to eventuate tomorrow, then I think there probably would be a few glasses clinking tomorrow night.
He's also the chair of Auckland's Regional Tourism Forum and says the border reopening will be a lifeline for business owners, not only financially but also for their mental health after 2 years of running on fumes.
New Zealand's been closed for a long time. There has been a perception in some of those markets in which we work that it's almost too difficult to do business in New Zealand in a tourism sense. Tomorrow, hopefully, will be that first sign that, we are reopening for business and we're welcoming of visitors.
Gavin Oliver says businesses can't afford an erratic opening, like last year's Trans-Tasman bubble.
Obviously, we need to be mindful of other variants, but at the moment, we need to be offering some certainty to our markets, and that's the key thing, is we can't have snap decisions. We need to give people certainty that coming to New Zealand is viable and is sensible.
Andrew Swass runs Kiwi Journeys and Electrify NZ e-bike hire in Nelson and on the West Coast. He says the sooner the better for the border, even though they're now on the wrong side of summer.
We've probably missed the boat. Generally starts to quieten down, obviously, after Easter. I guess it's been pretty bad timing with most tourism operators have missed the season, missed the summer. Yeah, but if there is good news and they allow them back in, then bookings are going to pick up, and hopefully that'll get most tourism businesses through to next summer.
Queenstown Airport Chief Executive Glenn Sari is keen to welcome back plenty of Australians to the slopes this winter.
What airlines and their passengers or customers are really going to be looking for is confidence that they can book, they can go ahead, organise accommodation, all that sort of thing, and have confidence they're going to be able to hit the slopes and have a great time. So that's really the critical timing for us, and as long as we get an announcement from the Prime Minister tomorrow that says that's going to be possible, then we'll be very happy.
Surrounded by mountains, pilots are required to use a special navigational tool and undergo training to help them fly in and out of Queenstown safely. He says it might be a challenge to get pilots back up to scratch.
It typically can be done in the simulator, which the pilots use extensively to train on aircraft. but it also requires some practical experience of flying into the destination for people to get fully certified. So that will take several weeks to get sufficient numbers of pilots all fully trained.
He expects they'll need at least a month to ramp up, but says airlines and airports will be hustling to get ready as soon as possible. After 2 years of uncertainty, businesses are counting down until tomorrow's announcement.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, says people should only consider themselves fully vaccinated if they've had 3 doses. Booster doses are lagging and meanwhile Pfizer says a 4th COVID vaccine dose is needed. A second booster has already been approved for some immunocompromised people in various more well-off countries. Albert Bourla is the company's chief executive. He says COVID-19 isn't going away anytime soon, and people still have to learn to live with the virus.
It is necessary a 4th boost right now. The protection that you are getting from the 3rd, it is good enough, actually quite good for hospitalizations and deaths. It's not that good against infections, but doesn't last very long.
Albert Bourla says he expects data on the Pfizer's vaccine's effectiveness for children 5 and under to be ready next month. CNN's Elizabeth Cohen has more.
Pfizer data has often been essentially Israeli data. Pfizer is basically the only vaccine used in Israel. Let's take a look at what we know about 4th doses in Israel. What we know is that they've looked at 400,000 people ages 60 plus who were given the 4th dose. The Israeli says that it more than triples the protection against serious illness and doubles the protection against infection. Now you can poke holes in that data. It's only people over age 60. Do we want to be giving 4th doses to people younger than that? Also, is it really so important that a vaccine protect against infection? Some people would say we should really be focusing on hospitalizations and deaths.
CNN's Elizabeth Cohen there, and you've got some strong views on booster shots. Jonathan's got in touch to say, if the authorities want us triple dosed, why are they denying the 12 to 18-year-olds a booster shot? It makes no sense. I'd love to see you put this to the government as a supply issue. And this one says, Rod Jackson and the Director General of Health are starting to lose touch. If you have recently had COVID, you can't have a booster for 3 months. Do those people lose their vaccine pass even though their immunity is very high and they can't, by health department direction, get a booster? Would you want a booster to prevent Omicron when you've already had it? This latest edict doesn't make any sense, that listener says. Russian forces are continuing their assaults on several Ukrainian cities as another round of diplomatic talks ends in failure. Almost 3 million Ukrainians have fled the country, and the UN chief has signalled just how dangerous the situation may become if the fighting continues. This report is from the ABC's Barney Porter.
For many in the besieged port city of Mariupol on the Black Sea, the horror is endless. Daddy, I can't bear it anymore, this woman says, as she's comforted by her father. In the capital, Kyiv, at least 1 person died and 6 others were injured after an airstrike hit the suburbs. Katerina Kot was nearby. I was in my flat with my child who was doing his homework online, she says, and then there was a very loud explosion. The child became hysterical. Our windows and the balcony were shattered. Part of the floor fell down. It was very, very scary. Yulia Vigrinyak fled the southern city of Mykolaiv. They're killing peaceful citizens, peaceful children. They're being bombed, she says. It's very scary sitting in the hallway with your child and not knowing whether a Russian missile will hit you or not. And you don't know whether tomorrow you will live or be dead. And now the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has described just how high the stakes are, referencing for the first time last month's nuclear announcement by President Putin.
Further escalation of the war, whether by accident or design, threatens all of humanity. The prospect of nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is now back within the realm of possibility.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine began on February the 24th. Since then, almost 3 million people have fled across Ukraine's borders, while hundreds of thousands of others remain trapped in besieged cities. Robert Madini is the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross.
People are running out of water, electricity, gas for heating, access to medical services. The situation is really untenable, unbearable for civilians, and they really want a safe passage out.
The first successful example of a safe passage came overnight with a convoy of cars leaving Mariupol. It's one of 10 humanitarian corridors Ukraine is trying to create to evacuate trapped civilians. Many of the refugees end up in Poland, a former Soviet satellite and now a NATO member state. The Deputy Foreign Minister, Paul Jablonski, says his country needs more money to help the fleeing Ukrainians.
This is a challenge that Europe hasn't faced in decades. We need to put aside all the smaller things. This is the very difficult situation that we are facing now beyond our borders, and we don't know what's coming to Europe. We need to brace ourselves for much darker times, because we are living in very close to a much darker country now.
And with no headway in the latest round of talks between Ukraine and Russia, the dark times are set to continue.
Let's get to some of your thoughts on transport, because, boy, you've got a lot of them. On speed limits around Auckland, this is Auckland Transport's review of speed limits. Mark says, it's futile. During busy times when safety is an issue, speeds are already slow, and slow motorists down during non-peak times is unreasonable, a pointless waste of money, says Mark. This is a drop to 30 kilometres an hour in some areas. We live on a street up from a school, says Grant. There are already chicanes intended to slow traffic, but lots of drivers take them as a challenge to see how fast they can get through them. We need a 30 speed limit and speed bumps, or a child is going to get killed by a speeding driver. On the other side of the coin, safety matters, but 30 kilometres an hour, 24/7 is excessive and marks a new round of nanny state, says this person. And another listener says, I don't understand the rationale for making it 24/7. Driving past a local school at 3 a.m. and getting a ticket for doing 35 k's seemed ridiculous to me. It would be great to have flexible speed limits that reflected the time of day and general location. And just a couple on the public transport issue too. This is cutting the cost of public transport by half. This person says, I'm thrilled about the bus fare reductions. It's a win for the environment. And Fiona has emailed in and says, my current return trip to work is $10, and it makes me think twice about every journey. The monthly Auckland pass is currently $215. With the discount, I'll be able to buy a monthly pass for $107, which will totally encourage me to use public transport more. If this lasted forever, I would save $1,200 a year. Total winner, says Fiona. Thanks for your feedback. Australia and the Netherlands have launched legal action against Russia over the 2014 missile attack on a Malaysian airline passenger flight, which killed 298 people. The families of some of the Australians killed in the attack have welcomed the legal action. The plane, MH17, was shot down by a Russian-made missile as it flew over eastern Ukraine, killing everyone on board, including 38 Australians and 1 New Zealander. The ABC's Annie Guest reports.
8 years on, the latest chapter in the fight for justice over the MH17 tragedy is welcome news for relatives of the victims, including Queenslander Paul Gard, whose parents Jill and Roger were on board.
I do support all actions to try to hold Russia accountable, because at the end of the day, families really just want the truth, and they just want an apology. And I think most families would be a lot happier, or at least partly satisfied, if Russia acknowledged the facts of what happened and owned up to its role.
Merrin O'Brien's son, 25-year-old Jack, died in the MH17 crash, and she also welcomes the latest move.
I think it's a good thing. In some ways it wasn't a surprise after negotiations broke down at the end of 2020. So, I feel upset hearing it, because it's always about Jack for us and everybody else, but I think it's a good path to go down.
Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was travelling from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was hit over rebel-held eastern Ukraine by what international investigators and prosecutors say was a Russian-made surface-to-air missile. Australia and the Netherlands have now begun a joint legal action against Russia at the UN's International Civil Aviation Organisation. It's a bid to force Russia to revive negotiations over possible compensation payments. The Foreign Minister is Maurice Payne.
There's no doubt
that Russia's invasion has been a painful reminder to those who lost loved ones on flight MH17.
University of Sydney international law professor Ben Saul says the latest legal action could lead to Russia losing its representation at the International Civil Aviation Organisation.
So it would be a fairly serious step to suspend a major civilian airline country like Russia from that body, and Russia would commensurately lose influence and power in that technical area of civil aviation.
He says a majority of the 36 member states of the UN's aviation organisation would need to agree.
The timing is favourable to Australia and the Netherlands, and of course the global condemnation of Russia now may well play into that decision.
While there's already Dutch-led court action against 4 men allegedly involved in the attack, Professor Saul says this new action could air other evidence.
So it may be an opportunity for intelligence evidence, for example, to come out, which may or may not be admissible in the criminal proceedings, which could attribute what happened to the Russian authorities directly.
For the first time in almost a decade, the Queen has missed the annual Commonwealth Day service in London. Prince Charles represented the Queen at the service at Westminster Abbey. The BBC's Nicholas Witchell reports.
It has been one of the abiding themes of her reign, the Commonwealth of Nations, representing nearly 1/3 of the world's population and 1/5 of its land area. But now, after 70 years of the Queen's reign, it's time for others to take the lead. The simple fact is that the long walk up the aisle of Westminster Abbey is too much for a monarch who is nearly 96. The congregation was transported to different Commonwealth cultures. It was reminded of today's horror story taking place on the boundaries of this continent.
At this very moment, Ukraine risks being pulverized.
But above all, this was the Commonwealth, paying tribute to the person who today was absent, but who's done so much to keep it together.
Long live the Queen. Amen. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip.
Today's cheers were unscripted, and in 2 weeks there will be another heartfelt occasion, a service of thanksgiving for the life of the Duke of Edinburgh. The Queen will hope to be there.
And that's almost us for the evening. The Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. And remember, if you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m, with the border announcement expected tomorrow. First Up speaks to tourism operators about welcoming back overseas visitors. Kaua e wariwari te atatero I a mātou kōrero. Don't forget all our videos and stories online. Check them out.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The head of the SIS is worried about what she says is a small number of politically motivated violent extremists reacting to COVID-19 health measures. Epidemiologist Rod Jackson believes a requirement of the vaccine pass should be 3 COVID-19 doses. The National MP and former leader Simon Bridges says he's sad but excited to be retiring from Parliament, and it appears that almost all of Russia's advances on Ukraine have been stalled for several days. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
It's not a moment too soon that we need to stand up and say, no, I abhor the nuclear situation. I detest what we actually had to do. A good move on the government to say, if you're an Operation Grapple veteran, you got grapple, then go and see a doctor. We will pick up the tab. I sincerely, in my deepest heart, wish something like the government would do that, just because we did our service.
Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Karen. I'm getting ready for another night on RNZ National, which commences after the news at 7 with an interview with our geographer Louise Richards, who's brought another geographer along. And they're going to talk about the geography of wine. It's as much a human thing as it is a plant thing. And in this half hour, later on, our latest report into the inner workings of the House. But we commence With this edition of The Detail, South Auckland is once again bearing the brunt of a COVID-19 outbreak. But One Pacific health provider is doing everything it can to help whānau isolating at home.
Kia ora, I'm Jessie Chang, and today on The Detail, I'm in South Auckland with a South Seas community support mobile team. I'm with Tyler and Nano. What are we doing today, Tyler?
So today we are going out and visiting families that are in self-isolation. So families that have been referred to us through different streams in the community. They're often families that have been identified as high needs, so whether that's high health needs or high social needs. So what we'll do is deliver them some resources at the door, provide some rapid antigen tests if needed, and also some extra resources such as masks, sanitizers, gloves. But the more important side of it is that the families feel like they're being looked after for social needs, in particular food and financial assistance.
Awesome. Well, let's hit the road.
South Auckland has been the epicentre of most of New Zealand's COVID outbreaks over the last 2 years. Delta was bad.
This is the second time that it has borne the brunt of numbers significantly in a major outbreak.
But Omicron is another level.
Pacifica now make up around half of the cases in the current Omicron outbreak. Most of them are in the Auckland region.
About half of all children turning up to Middlemore's emergency department have the virus.
As we've seen throughout this pandemic, it's those with the least who are suffering the most. And again, it's South Auckland bearing the brunt of Omicron.
Case numbers change all the time, but at the moment, 1 in 5 active COVID-19 cases is in the county's Manukau DHB area. What is it like working on the front lines, caring for those with COVID in their homes?
I wish we pushed harder for a lockdown. Then maybe we wouldn't be seeing the numbers that we're seeing today.
Just some background to South Auckland. The county's Manukau DHB is one of the country's biggest. It serves the largest Pacific population and the second largest Māori population. It's also home to some of our most socio-economically deprived people. South Seas Healthcare Trust is Otara's largest Pacific provider, and since the start of the pandemic, it's been on the front lines supporting whānau to deal with COVID. Now, we'll get back to Tyler and Nano soon, but first, here's Cherry Alasaya, the team lead for South Seas Community Supported Isolation and Quarantine Branch, known as CSIQ.
There was a need for support with our Pacifica families because of our Pacifica being identified as the vulnerable group, especially in the last 2 lockdowns. Pacifica has been the face of COVID, and it was identified from mainstream and Ministry of Health that they had to establish a service that can support our Pacifica community and involving our primary healthcare providers.
Especially as the government moved to self-isolation at home.
Essentially what you're saying is that the kind of situation that an awful lot of Pacific households find themselves in, crowded and multi-generational, would not be suitable for home isolation.
Not.
Right.
Absolutely not. The risk of spread is just very high.